Hello, Hokies. I'm Tech Sideline founder Will Stewart, and this is the joy of live television. Welcome to episode 248 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Spoiler alert, Grant Wells has been named the starting quarterback at Virginia Tech. We've got injury news also. The Big Ten has signed a ginormous contract with Fox, CBS, and NBC, not ESPN. And we talk about other topics and take your questions. It's all coming up on this edition of the Tech Sideline podcast. Tech Sideline, not the Tech Sideline podcast, but the entirety of Tech Sideline, is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. First Bank and Trust Company, one of the nation's leading community banks, is a nationally ranked, community-focused bank with over 30 locations throughout Virginia and Northeast Tennessee, with additional presence in North Carolina. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking, financing solutions for personal, agriculture, business, commercial, and mortgage needs, and more. Visit www.firstbank.com to learn more. First Bank is also the bank of Tech Sideline, so we have a lot of experience with them. And one of the cool things about First Bank is it's actual people. So check them out. And if you have needs for any of the things we just listed, please give them a shot at your business. All right, so a little bit of house cleaning. First of all, like and subscribe here on YouTube. Appreciate that. And speaking of subscribing, this is the time to subscribe to TechSideline.com. First month is free for monthly subscribers, so give us a run, $10 a month. Annual subs are $100, so that's a discount of $20 off of going month to month. Student subscriptions are free, and I always tell people, money back guarantee. If you subscribe and you don't like it and you don't think it's worth it, email me. I get that email occasionally, like once every 5 years or so, and I'm always happy to provide a money back guarantee when that happens. Content on the website, we're currently covering fall camp and doing position previews and analysis of the various positions on the football team. One last thing, many thanks to Clark Ruland for the awesome Tech Sideline helmets here on the podcast set. We rolled those out probably about 2 weeks ago, I think, when Katie did the last podcast. Clark actually made 5 helmets for us, and if you're watching YouTube, you only see 2 of them here. We got some other cool ones that we will roll out during the football season. So let's introduce today's on-air talent in the red shirt chair, the man whose favorite day is leg day, TSL lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Across the way, the best hair on the Virginia Tech sports beat, TSL managing editor David Cunningham.
Is that because nobody else has hair?
If you think about it, nobody else really.
Not some people still have hair, but a lot of them are losing it.
Yes, and I wonder if that's a product of the job or if it's just a product of biology. So keep working that beat,
David. Get out while you can.
Yeah. We'll find out, yeah. So producing today's show, our newly minted head of audio video production, Nick Brown. And Nick is shadowed today by TSL wrestling writer and former Tech Talk Live Notes veteran Jack Brizendine. And here to observe it all is sports media and analytics freshman Abby Nielsen, who just arrived on campus Tuesday. So welcome, Abby. And the room is full. That's 6 people, I think. So Katie's unavailable this week. Jake is still not back yet.
In Minnesota.
Yeah, he calls for the St. Cloud Rocks in their winning program, so they keep making the playoffs every year. And Jake literally hits the runway hot and goes straight to his first class.
Well, it's funny because when Evan was there, before Evan got there, because Evan Hughes was also there, yeah. And they went to the finals the year before Evan got there. Evan's there for 2 or 3 years, and they didn't make it past like the quarters and the semis, and then Evan leaves, and then Jake goes, and this is Jake's second year, and they made it to the championship game last year, and they're on their way this year.
I wonder how they did when John Laser was there.
That's a good question.
That'd be a trivia question to be answered. So that's my long-winded way of explaining to you that you're once again stuck with me hosting. And I've been super busy, have tried to read as much of our content as I can, try to come up with some good topics. So you guys will have to carry me on this one. And let's start with Grant Wells being named the starting QB to no one's surprise. And that was announced by Pry at yesterday's media opportunity, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's shocked. We saw what he did during the spring game.
Was he previously named the starting quarterback? Like, I have this memory that they said he's
No.
guy.
I mean, there was one point when the quarterbacks coach Brad Glenn did some like private interviews with I think Bitter and Nizialek, and the quote from Glenn in those interviews, he was like, "I think we all know who the starter's going to be."
Okay.
Right. So Glenn basically in public comments basically said, yeah, nobody else has a chance to win this job. Now, I think it was fair to give Jason Brown a shot to win it after a spring, and you digest the offense, and then you work over the summer in the strength and conditioning program and timing with your receivers. Give him another chance to win it. But I don't think it was ever realistic that he would.
Yeah, Wells was always taking the quarterback 1 reps anyway.
Right. Yeah.
And during the spring game, 47-yard, 51-yard touchdown passes to Caleb Smith. We've seen what Grant Wells can do. He's a he started at Marshall for 2 seasons, so he's previously been named the starting quarterback elsewhere. I think this is kind of what everybody expected. And then the news was officially announced yesterday after Virginia Tech's, I think Brent Pry said 13th football practice in fall camp. So
yeah, okay. So I want to get to. I'm gonna do a couple things here. I want to read some comments that QB coach Brad Glenn made, because to me they were pretty remarkable. And then David, you had some stats in your article yesterday, which I think put Grant Wells in perspective. So let's start with, and this is a little bit long-winded, but I looked through your article and I'm like, well, I got to put that. So here we go. This is quarterbacks coach Brad Glenn. I think his number one asset is his deep ball accuracy. It's nothing really that I've taught him. He came here with a really good feel for throwing a deep ball. And when you've got a guy like that you've got confidence in, that you can take more shots, usually it's a really good rule of thumb. You like to take 2 or 3 deep shots a quarter, but with him, it might be even more, right? Next paragraph. The first thing I think about and you're going to hear the word accuracy in this paragraph a lot. The first thing I think about when I think about Grant is just his accuracy. He's got incredible accuracy. We give these guys an accuracy or location GPA, just like you do in school. You get a 1, 2, 3, and a 4. And grading some of his balls, it's incredible, his accuracy. Whether it's quicks, intermediate, deep balls, he might be the most accurate I've ever coached. And lastly, and then that pocket movement, he just has a knack, a sense of when to move and how to move and not bail too quick. A lot of guys have got decent running skills. They want to get the ball out immediately. Well, he does a good job of that and hanging in the pocket, knowing when and when not to get out, and then having little efficient movements with his feet. He's a total package. Whoa, pump the brakes. I mean, I think my opinion is, like ESPN listed their power rankings the other day, listed Tech 12th out of the 14 ACC teams. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think the reason is Grant Wells, but that's a QB coach really going hard to the hole with a lot of effusive praise.
I think anybody, I've read a few times from a few people, even some of our own fans, that like Virginia Tech doesn't have a Power 5 quarterback.
Right.
Like anybody who says that has actually never turned on any kind of film and watched him throw a football.
Yeah.
Like this guy is honestly Ryan Willis, who played in the NFL,
but more mobile and with a better arm.
Yeah, I don't know if he's more mobile.
Well,
Ryan Willis could run.
He was a straight line runner. I don't know what Wells
remember he broke off like that 40-yard run as soon as he came into the ODU game, and he had like the 4th and 13 scramble against UNC to win that game.
Yes, that's true.
But at any rate, like he's not quite as tall as Willis, but I think their arms are similar.
Yeah.
I think both guys can make any throw on the field. Turnover rate's a little high.
Yes.
The quote I like was, you remember Ryan Willis said the scared money don't make money quote. Right. Now, what was Brad Glenn's quote to?
Oh man,
I don't remember what it was, but it was something similar, except it was the opposite. It was like, okay, you don't have to throw deep on every play. Sometimes you can just take the check down option. Yeah. It was like you'll never go hungry if you do something. I don't know. But it was basically the opposite of the Ryan Willis.
You never go broke making a profit.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Captain Obvious.
Captain Obvious. But yeah.
Yeah. And of course, the funniest part was he said that, and Andy Bitter asked a follow-up question. Said, "Brad Glenn, have any more of those phrases you can share with us?" And he said, "Not any I can share."
Yeah. So I think Wells is a good player. And I've said from the very beginning, I was never worried about whoever starts at quarterback for Virginia Tech. I was more worried about who was going to catch the ball.
Yeah, if you're throwing the ball deep, who's going to catch it?
who's
Who's
going
going
to
to hand the
block.
ball off to and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I asked Grant yesterday after practice when we spoke to him and Brad Glenn and Brent Pry. I asked him what what area of his game he's improved the most since the spring. And he said really just not forcing things. And of course, as somebody who's thrown a lot of interceptions in his career, that's huge. But I included that part in my article yesterday. I think that part is going to be so key because, of course, you listed all the praise Brad Glenn gave him. Brent Pry gave him similar praise. He's clearly got the arm for it. He can read the game. But I think it's when he feels like he has to force things is where things went wrong in the past. And he even said, coming out of last season, he knew he needed to work on not forcing things in the offseason. It sounds like he's done that.
Well, something I read, and I think it was your article also, Virginia Tech has a somewhat unique situation in that they've got a quarterbacks coach who is not the offensive coordinator.
This is the first time This is the first time in a long time Brad Glenn has not been the offense coordinator while being the quarterbacks coach. And it's the first time in Wells' career that he's had a different – yeah.
And they've been working on the turnover issues, right?
Yeah. Well, and Wells said it's much easier than some offense coordinators like being up in the booth, some like being on the field. But either way, they've got to worry about the offensive line. They've got to worry about the wide receivers, the running backs, everything else. Grant Wells can come off the field and go up to Brad Glenn, and Brad Glenn has 4 people to worry about, and it's 4 quarterbacks.
Right. And
he can go up to Brad Glenn and like right after something happens and just break it down with him right then and there. And it's much easier than going back and watching film a couple hours later.
Right. All right, so compare it to Virginia Tech's situation back when Steiny was the offensive coordinator. He was also the tight ends coach. And I think, or he was the offensive line coach for a while and then tight ends coach. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He was not the quarterback's coach. And think about how much Brian Randall developed under Kevin Rogers, who was just a quarterback's coach, and how much, Marcus Vick developed. And yes, I mean, and then after Rogers left, you've got, Mike O'Kane coming in, and, Sean Glennon developed into a good passer for Virginia Tech. Some would disagree with that, but he was a good passer. Tyrod Taylor developed with a quarterback's coach who wasn't a coordinator. So this is a recipe that has worked for Virginia Tech in the past.
Nice. So one of the things that's said about Grant Wells is that he's played a couple years at Marshall. He's got 3 years left here, 3 years of eligibility.
2 in a COVID year.
Yeah, the 2 and a COVID year. That he's a mature guy.
He's already engaged.
He's engaged, right? So he's not your typical college sophomore, junior, however you want to slot his age. Now, again, I'm short on the details. Has Grant Wells talked to the press, and have you guys been in the room with him?
I talked to him for 2 or 3 minutes the other day. I really like him. His dad's a Tech grad, but he grew up in West Virginia. Yeah. So he's one of those rare people. Listen, if you grew up in the state of West Virginia, you're a West Virginia football fan. Yeah. That's the most loyal state in this country, I think, as far as loyalty to their biggest program.
I think so.
Yeah. I wish Virginia was half as loyal to Virginia as to Virginia Tech football.
A former Marshall quarterback is going to be the Virginia Tech quarterback in the Virginia Tech West Virginia.
Right.
Against West Virginia.
Yeah. So he grew up a West Virginia fan and a Virginia Tech fan. Yeah. So I talked to him about that a little bit. But yeah, I like him. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders, and he's at least going to be the starter for 2 years for Virginia Tech, hopefully 3, barring injury. So when's the last time Virginia Tech actually had a quarterback start all of 2 straight seasons?
Logan Thomas.
Yeah. And even
Michael Brewer almost did it.
Almost did it, right. Well, was going to do it until that first game in 2015, and he got his, what was it, his clavicle broken, I believe this was. Yeah. But, and even Logan Thomas that year was like, he was in a boot most of the time. Like he'd take it off before he went to media session, so nobody would actually know he was hurt. But yeah, he was hurt. He was just so big and tough that he kept playing. So hopefully Grant Wells, we can have a returning starter next season. I think that'd be very important.
Yeah. 6'1", 208. Is that what they said?
Sounds about right.
6'1", 6'2", maybe 6'2". Yeah. I forget. You can read it all on Text Sideline because I wrote about it.
Right.
No, I like Wells. He's spoken to the media a couple times. Jason Brown has too, and I think it's kind of like what Chris has to say. It's two mature guys. You kind of knew what you were getting. I think everybody kind of expected Wells to get it just because he put up more numbers, which I'm sure we're going to get into in a second. But it's two veterans in the room to go along with a redshirt freshman and a true freshman.
Right.
You can't really go wrong with that kind of recipe. So I think in general, Wells is a good leader. And Brad Glenn and Brent Pry both talked about it yesterday, how, he's not a very he's not a well-spoken guy. He's not a very vocal guy. He's a very lead by example guy. But now that he's a starting quarterback, now it's kind of his unit to control. They expect him to kind of progress more in that area.
Yeah, and he's got a bunch of new teammates too. You don't just walk into a new locker room and just take control of it.
Yeah.
When you haven't even been named the starter yet.
So you guys were talking about the possibility of him starting for 2 or 3 years, and David Hale, who covers the ACC for ESPN, is that right? I love David's stuff. I follow him on Twitter. And listen to this stat. There are only 5 Power 5 teams who haven't had a QB with 25-plus starts in the playoff era. What is that, 2014 on?
Yes.
Yeah, they're just thereabouts.
So in the last 8 or 9 seasons, however you want to break that out, only 5 Power 5 teams have failed to have a quarterback with 25-plus career starts. So Maryland, the most they've done in that stretch is Perry Hillis started 19 games for him. Now, Tagovailoa has 17 starts. He'll play this year, and he'll build upon that. Virginia Tech is next. Michael Brewer with 20 starts. Mm-hmm. Kansas, and you don't want to be Kansas. You don't want to be neighbors with Kansas.
You don't want to be mentioned in a sentence with him in football.
Carter Stanley had 21 starts in his career. Kyle Trask at Florida had 22 starts. So Florida,
it's another that's one of the reasons Florida's football program has dropped off.
Yeah, the state of Florida, I think, used to be kind of perceived as one of the cradles of quarterbacks, and there's University of Florida unable to get a guy with a lot of years of experience. And lastly, Rutgers, there's somebody else you don't want to be in the same neighborhood with. Noah Vedral, 22 starts. So I thought that was a really interesting stat. Yeah. And David finds all kinds of neat stuff like that. So David Cunningham, you put some stats in your article about Wells being named the starter. And I wish we had a graphic to put up on the video.
Me too, yeah.
Yeah, so this will help put into perspective the kinds of things that Grant Wells has accomplished in his career and last season. So go.
Yeah. So I got this idea because David Teal wrote an article last week where he kind of detailed, okay, if this is what Grant Wells kind of brings to the table. And I looked at some of those numbers and said, okay, how does this compare to the Virginia Tech record book? Well, the record for total passes in a season is 441. That was Michael Brewer in 2014. Grant Wells would have broken that record by 4 last year with 445 passes. For season passing yards, the record at Virginia Tech is 3,546, 3,546. Gerard Evans in 2016. Last year, Grant Wells was 14 yards short of that.
And he played in one fewer game than Evans did in 2016.
Yeah, so in most passes completed in a game, he would have tied Don Strock's record of 34, which was set back in 1972 against
when Tech never
Houston.
ran the ball.
Yeah. Most passes completed in a season, he completed 295 passes. The Virginia Tech record is 268. That was also Gerard Evans in 2016. Yards per game average, it's 271.7. And this was a stat I took from David Teal because that would be the most since Don Strock, who set the record with almost 295 yards per game in 1972.
So yards per game average, that was last season for Wells?
Yes.
Okay.
He averaged 272 yards per game through the air. And then completion percentage, he would hold the record. If you took his last season stats, he would hold the record at Virginia Tech for completion percentage in a season with 66.3%. That's 1 percentage better than Hendon Hooker in 2020. So he's a very, like Brad Glenn said, very accurate guy. I don't expect him, Tyler Bowen. I mean, obviously depends on Malachi Thomas, who we'll get to in a second, in the running game and how they balance everything. I don't expect him to throw the ball 295 times, or I don't expect him to complete 295 passes in a season, but he's got the arm to do it.
I think, now jumping onto this next topic, the injuries, Malachi Thomas being out right now, for now, week to week, whatever that means. Was week to week going to turn into month to month? I mean, who knows? But we know he's not at practice right now.
Correct.
And if you're close to coming back, then you're at practice like Jaden Blue. So he's not close to coming back. I would not expect Malachi Thomas, we mean. So I would not expect him to play against ODU, maybe even Boston College. Like, I'm not counting on him coming back anytime soon.
Yeah.
I wrote a few weeks ago, somebody asked a Q&A question, who are the most indispensable players on the team who can't get hurt, right? And I said, well, after the offensive tackles, it's Malachi Thomas, because I don't think anybody else is really close to him in terms of running back talent. So here we go, right? Here we go. Now, everybody keeps saying, Wells we're going to be a power running team. We're not going to throw it all that much. I think our number one asset on offense is Grant Wells' arm, and we're going to throw the ball a hell of a lot more than people think we are. Yeah. That's my opinion.
Interesting
Especially early in the season.
I was going to say, do you think it changes now? How much do you think it adjusts the game plan with Malachi Thomas being out?
If he's 100%,
if Malachi Thomas isn't playing.
No, he's still not a 20 carry a game guy because of his build, in my opinion. At least not on a. He went over 20 carries a couple times last year in back-to-back games, but I don't think you do that over the course of 12 games with him.
Yeah.
At least I hope you don't.
So let's go ahead and drill down into that a little bit. You're right. Injury news is the next thing we're going to talk about. Malachi Thomas. So who do you have at running back? You got Jalen Holston, then what?
Let me see if we got in there to watch for 10 whole minutes yesterday.
Five other running backs.
5 other running backs. So when I was watching them go through drills yesterday, Jalen Holston was number 1. Sean King was number 2.
Keyshawn King.
Yep. Chance Black was number 3. Bryce Duke was number 4. Kenji Christian was number 5.
Okay.
That's the order right now with Malachi Thomas.
It is going to be. I agree with you guys. I think that Tech wants to be a running team first, but we'll see how things shake out. You got to go with your best assets.
Yeah, and I'm interested to just see. I know it'll kind of be like this for most of the players, just because it's a new regime, kind of a clean slate. Jalen Holston has been talked about as a really consistent player, both through the spring, throughout fall camp so far. I asked Brent Pry, I said, what's one word to describe Jalen Holston? I asked him yesterday. He gave me 28, but he said well-rounded. And I think that's interesting. He's Tyler Bowen, Stu Holt, now Brent Pry. They've all preached and praised Jalen Holston for his consistency. He's obviously the elder statesman in that room, but with Malachi Thomas out, he's really the only guy in that room that has reps. Chance Black, he's seen garbage time, but
King's got some.
I guess Keyshawn King has too, yes.
He's not really an inside zone type guy, though.
That's true. So, and who knows where Keyshawn King stands. Jalen Holston's kind of the only guy that they seem like crazy comfortable with. So I'm interested to see where, if Malachi Thomas can't go, how they utilize Jalen Holston, how much he can help balance the offense, because if Virginia Tech doesn't have Malachi Thomas and they can't do much on the ground, they're going to be relying on Grant Wells' arm a lot.
No, I do think this offense is a better fit for Holston than the old one, because he just looks like more of an inside zone guy than an outside zone guy. So I just theoretically, this is a better fit for him. I hope he has a good year, because I like Jalen Holston. This is his 6th year. He's never really locked down a spot of consistent playing time, and these days nobody else is going to stay 6 years except for Tyrell Smith. If they're not playing, right? So you have to appreciate that as a fan. You appreciate when a player, even though he's not playing all that much, is dedicated enough and likes playing here enough that he stays. So we're all pulling for Holston to have success because of that.
Other piece of injury news is Dallin Wright. So put that in context for me as far as outside receivers, slot receivers. Where was Wright going to fit? Well, first of all, let's go over his situation. He's out for the year.
Yes, out for the year, had surgery. Brent Pry did not specify what the injury was.
Right.
He posted a picture on Instagram of himself in his hospital bed, though, so it's fairly significant.
And he also did not say what the issue was.
Correct. Yeah,
It's something that required surgery.
Yeah,
Right.
he was gonna. I would have expected him to be in the 2 deep. You know, I couldn't say what spot for sure, and I'm honestly still kind of curious to see how the wide receiver room shakes out, especially because another guy, don't want to get off topic, but Jaden Blue, the Temple transfer at wide receiver, one of 2 guys really with a ton of experience. He's been out, hasn't really practiced. He's supposed to be back, this week. Brent Pry said he's on the mend, but we haven't really seen the full receiver core at full strength, so it's been kind of hard to tell who's kind of lining up where. I guess you have Caleb Smith, and you have DeJuan Lofton, you have Jaden Blue, and those are 3 guys you have. And then after that, it's kind of just filling in the gaps.
Have you guys done your wide receiver preview yet?
Have we? No, we didn't.
No,
we were going to wait to see what they said about Dallin Wright.
I think we're saving that for
That should be early next week.
Okay, because I saw a bunch of offensive articles, but I didn't remember seeing the wide receiver. So
we were waiting for to hear what the news was on Thomas and on the wide receivers that haven't been at practice.
Yep.
So next week we're going to do a podcast, probably Thursday, because in the preseason they're talking to the media every Wednesday. So we're going to wait for next Wednesday. So first of all, the team is going to start preparing for ODU next Tuesday, right? Then they're going to do a press conference Wednesday, media opportunity Wednesday, and then I think we'll do a podcast Thursday and kind of wrap up fall camp. So I don't want to drill down into the depth chart at every position or anything like that. But I did read your defensive line preview article, David, and Tywan Garbett, always really good at the media, had some interesting comments. He basically said that Virginia Tech's defense has gone back to being more of an attacking defense as opposed to, I don't want to say read and react. I don't think that's accurate, but and he seemed to really like that. So what's your take from talking to him?
I think as Chris would agree, Justin Hamilton's defense required more thinking on your feet. It wasn't just go play football. It was kind of reading the situation. I kind of was react, at least more so than the new style. But yeah, Tywan Garbett, first of all, great guy, great to chat with the media, but he kind of said this has kind of been the scheme that a lot of the veterans in the room have been waiting for, not just at defensive end, but also defensive tackle. Right. You've got that trio of Josh Fuga, Mario Kendricks, Norrell Pollard. Those guys are all between 6 foot, 6'2", and they're all probably in the 280 to 300 range. That's a lot different from the guys Justin Hamilton recruited, where they were 6'5", 240, 250. Big difference. Heavier versus taller.
Right.
And now you're giving all these guys, including Tywan Garbett, a guy like Jalen Griffin, the guys that have been in this program for a long time, who kind of had to kind of readjust themselves, kind of what they had been taught to do previously by Bud Foster in that old scheme and Charlie Wiles, I guess. They had to readjust it when Justin Hamilton came in. And now it's kind of, I don't want to say it's the exact same, but it's very similar. to that scheme that Bud Foster used.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically, like you said, it's not the exact same, but in general, they're basically now going to be playing the scheme that they were recruited to play at Virginia Tech. Because most of these guys were recruited to play under Bud Foster. And it makes more of a difference with I think it's made most of a difference with the defensive tackles. Like, if you're a read and react linebacker, and it's made a difference with the linebackers too, to a certain extent. So yeah, if you're a quote-unquote read and react linebacker, you have to depend on those defensive tackles in front of you occupying blockers. Well, Norrell Pollard, like a couple of years ago when he was playing at 265 pounds, he's not going to be able to occupy those blockers. He wasn't a fit for the scheme, right? Yeah. So he bulked up to like 281 last year and had a solid year last year, but that was not a scheme that he was suited for. Yeah. Like, so I actually think Norrell Pollard's going to have a very good year because he's finally an upperclassman in a scheme that he's suited for.
Yeah, and everything, chatting with J.C. Price, who we know is very open, he seemed very confident just about the group as a whole. And Brent Pry said the defensive end depth is maybe the best depth that they have on the whole team. I mean,
Yeah.
they've got a lot of bodies up there. They've got a core of about, between tackle and end, they've got a core of about 6, 7, 8 experienced guys, and then they got a lot of young talent behind them. I'm really interested to see how much the scheme helps. They don't have a guy like Omari Barno, who was a freak athlete, but they do have a lot of guys who, C.J. McCray, Cole Nelson, those guys have received a lot of praise from Chris Marv, J.C. Price, Brent Pry.
Yeah, they've really piled the praise on C.J. McCray.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see how the defensive line kind of matches up, because Virginia Tech defensive lines haven't really. They've kind of just done their thing. Haven't really done anything extra recently.
My column today is on the defensive line.
Yeah.
The defensive line, the last couple of years, 2020, I'm not going to count, because they had most of them were unsuited for that scheme, and then they didn't even have an off season to try to get themselves bigger for a new scheme, and then they didn't get to practice the new scheme to begin with. So that whole situation was unfair when you're changing to a new scheme like that in a COVID year. Generally speaking, though, our offensive linemen, our Tech's defensive linemen, have either stayed the same or progressed somewhat, which leads me to believe that they've had better coaching. Like I think Justin Fuente did a good job hiring defensive line coaches at Virginia Tech. Tapp was a competent coach, even though he was only here for 1 year.
Cup of coffee.
J.C. Price is a competent coach. Tierlink was a competent coach, and then before that, obviously, Charlie Wiles, who was retained by Fuente, was a competent coach. I don't think some of his other coaching hires at some of the other defensive spots where we've seen regression from the players throughout their careers, don't think they were such good hires. Now, as far as the scheme goes, I guess probably there's some people surprised that Justin Hamilton didn't run a scheme similar to Bud Foster's, but you shouldn't be. Justin Hamilton played defense at Virginia Tech for 1 year. He has 1 year in Bud Foster's scheme. He played in more defensive schemes in the NFL than he did at Virginia Tech. He learned from more college coaches, when he was a younger coach. He learned more schemes from other college coaches than he learned from Bud Foster in his 1 year playing defense at Virginia Tech. Yeah. He has more exposure to other schemes than he did Bud Foster's scheme.
Meanwhile, Brent Pry was a GA in the 90s under Bud Foster defensively.
Exactly, and his dad was a longtime coach.
Yeah.
So I think, Brent Pry kind of cut his teeth to a certain extent in Bud Foster's defense and had a very good understanding of it, because he worked with it for 3 years, which is 3 times as long as Hamilton worked with it. So, all I'm saying is, this isn't really, it's not Hamilton's fault.
No.
He was hired to coach Virginia Tech's defense, and he used the scheme that he best understands.
Yeah, but he didn't. But because of COVID and because he was only here, as the defensive coordinator for 2 years, there wasn't enough time to get the players acclimated and adjusted to the new scheme,
or recruit a whole roster of players who were suitable for the scheme.
And that too.
Right.
And so now you flip it back, and there are still a handful of guys left over from that original group in 2017, 2018, 2019 that Bud Foster recruited and Charlie Wiles recruited, of guys that. It's not the exact same, but it's a very attack-minded style that the players are like, okay, this is something I'm familiar with. This is something I'm excited for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so to me, listening to all this and looking at the roster, I would caution patience, because you're now in your third defensive coordinator in 4 seasons. There are a lot of guys playing on the defensive line that have played under 3 different defensive coordinators.
And 4 different defensive line coaches, technically.
Yeah, so and that's when you introduce
4 different linebacker coaches.
Yeah. So that's
a lot of change.
You're not going to get consistency in one off season.
But it's easier to get consistency when you're not asked to do a whole lot. Like if you keep it simple on attack, it's easier to get consistency.
So let me ask you a question about the linebackers. Because this question was asked on our message boards, and I don't remember exactly how the person phrased it, but they basically asked, is it possible that the new defensive scheme can lead to improved play from Dax Hollifield because he is in a smaller box? I don't know if that's true or not. That's a question that was asked. Mm-hmm. Won't have to, you know, Dax is a guy that his weakness is operating in space. Is he going to be operating in more of a confined environment? You know, what are your thoughts there?
My initial impressions, at least what little bit of video I've watched, is that Pry has generally asked his mics to drop deep in coverage, and he demands his mics to be very good athletes. So, like, I don't think Pry, I don't mean this in the wrong way, I don't think Pry would have really recruited Dax heavily, because I don't think he's really a great fit for Pry's scheme. It doesn't mean I don't think Dax is a solid player and can be a solid player, but I just, for this scheme, for what Pry has done at times in the past, I don't know that that's the best fit.
Yeah.
So I do think he can get better, though. I think he can get better, you know, with better actual linebacker coaching, just on the little things. Yeah. I think he can get better because the defensive tackles in front of him now are better suited for the scheme that they're playing in. Yeah. So yes, he can certainly get better. I do think he's limited to a certain extent in terms of athleticism, which caps his ceiling. But I do think he can get better. Sure.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right, so aren't they talking about moving Alan Tisdale down to that Mike spot to provide competition?
Yeah, and I think the reason that they're talking about that is I just think Jaden Keller just sounds like he's won the Will job, the redshirt freshman, which I don't think I've heard a linebacker hyped like by Tech coaches like Jaden Keller.
What did you write yesterday? DB and Hall?
Oh, him and Kelly Lawson are the best two prospects that linebacker Tech has had since Hall and a DB. No question.
I think that's fair.
I mean, no, one of them's not a Mike like Hall was. One's a Will and one's a Sam.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they're both excellent athletes, rangy, good frames. I just think they're trying to find a spot for Tisdale. They're trying to see if, you know, if they can get better as a defense by adding some increased athleticism at the Mike spot.
Yeah, when you have to think Dax Hollifield, this is his final year of eligibility. Alan Tisdale has another year, a COVID year, if he wants to use it. So you could potentially be looking at a Lawson, Tisdale, Keller linebacker trio next year.
Right. But at any rate, I do like those two young linebackers in the program, and I like some of I like Will Johnson too, but he just keeps hurting his shoulder, and it's always a bad sign that when you have two shoulder injuries in your first
he's a
8 months
freshman,
on campus. You know, but I do like, if he could ever get healthy, I do like him.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I asked at Media Day, I asked Brent Pry, because he talked about building depth at linebacker. And I asked him, how do you do that? And he said, essentially, you just have guys learn one position really, really well. And once they learn that, you have them learn another position. And that's kind of the situation that Alan Tisdale's in. And, you know, I'm sure he's going to be on the field this year. Maybe Jaden Keller did win the battle at Will, but Alan Tisdale's they're trying to move him around and say something has to happen to Dax. You know, what if there is an unfortunate injury? You're going to need a guy to step up, and you know the depth behind him right now is like Dean Ferguson, which Dean Ferguson missed a lot of last year due to an injury. Mm-hmm. So just a lot of that, to your question, is building depth.
I like the way things come full circle. Weren't Dax and Tisdale both playing backer a couple of years ago, competing each other there?
Yes,
they were.
Interesting stuff. And now they're looking like they're down in Mike. So, David, I want to ask you. This goes back a couple of weeks. The ACC Network folks were here. Who was here that day?
It was Kelsey Riggs,
Mark Packer,
and Eddie Royal.
Okay, and you got to talk to all of them.
Yeah.
And you tweeted out some comments that Mark Packer made. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact tweet in front of me. Words to the effect of, these are some of the most intense practices I've seen, and certainly going around the ACC, they are among the most intense in the ACC. Does that sound?
Yeah, it was. Let me pull up. It should only take me a minute to pull it up. So essentially, I kind of asked Mark Packer, it was kind of generic. What have you noticed from?
Here you go. I've actually got it closer in my feed. Packer told me after being on the road around the ACC for 1 week, the intensity level at Virginia Tech's practice on Thursday was surprising compared to the rest of the league. Quote, you could sense it was different. You could close your eyes and get a sense of, man, it's hard to believe this is only the third practice, unquote.
Yeah, he said, quote, for this to be only the third practice on Thursday, I was really surprised at the intensity level, which I think is great because when I think of Virginia Tech football, I think of tough, physical, let's get down and in the dirt and go hit somebody. And I thought it was interesting because, it was, day 3 of Virginia Tech fall camp, and they had already been around. They had seen North Carolina and Duke and maybe they'd seen Wake Forest. They had seen half of the ACC at least.
Right.
And Packer was like, these Virginia Tech practices, they're intense. And it kind of went to what Brent Pry said after practice, which was that, and this was the first time we had a chance to talk to him, and he, or second time. And he said, Brent Pry's been preaching the intensity. And that's something I've written about, throughout fall camp and over the summer. They're trying to build this culture, build this identity. They want it to be a blue collar program where you have to work. We want to, essentially we want to smack you in the mouth as soon as we run out of the tunnel, and we just want to steamroll you and run through, which goes back to, the days of old Virginia Tech football. And I'm not surprised that that's how Packer felt, considering, when you go out there, the coaches are intense. They are yelling, but the players, from the ones I've talked to, the ones we've had the chance to speak with, they've all responded positively to it. And, I think it's a good culture that is being built.
So, Chris, let me play Debbie Downer here. Is there a chance that too much intensity over the course of a long season can take its toll, particularly if maybe you don't have the success in the wins and losses? What's your take on that?
Yeah, you have to have a group of guys that understand that maybe might be some bumps in the road early, and they have to keep pushing forward through them. We'll see if that's an issue or not. I think Virginia Tech has a chance to get off to a good start, and we've gone through those reasons before, and I don't want to do it all over again. But I do think they have a chance to get off to a good start, which I think could help validate some of that stuff. There have been some rumblings that Virginia Tech has been more physical in the practices where they hit this year. There's been an emphasis on physical play, which I think is a good thing. And guess what? There's been actually fewer injuries this year, because I think most staffs are better at. You have to expect your players to understand what's hurt and what's injured. Look, it's football. Everybody's hurt.
Yeah.
I remember Justin Fuente's first practice at Virginia Tech. He understood that at first and did a good job of it. There was 20 guys out injured. And but even the injured guys, they had working. Isaiah Ford's out there slamming some mallet into the ground just to give him something to do while he's out injured, So magically all those guys are back at the next practice because they figured out that they couldn't lay out of practice. They still had to work even if they were hurt, because the coaches are using that to figure out who's actually hurt and who's not, right? So I think this group of players has figured out under this staff the difference between being hurt and being injured, and that's going to make them a tougher football team. You're going to see fewer injuries now, but that's because they weren't actually injuries. Yeah.
I hope so. So that's good. We're about halfway through the show. Appreciate all that, guys. And again, we'll do a full camp wrap up. I don't know who's going to host that one, if it's going to be Jake or going to be Katie next week. So we're going to take a brief break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about $1 billion for the Big Ten media contract, and that's coming back after the break.
$1 billion a year.
Welcome back into the Tech Sideline Podcast, episode 248. And remember that Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. So let's talk about the Big Ten's whopper of a contract, which was announced yesterday. So I'm going to run over the basics of it. We don't need to get down into the weeds of it. 7 years, starting in July of 2023, so about a year from now, to the middle of 2030. So a 7-year contract, $7 billion, averages out to $1 billion a year, $7 billion. It averages out to $1 billion a year. It's back-end loaded, so it won't start out at $1 billion a year, but it'll build up to it. And this cynical part of me says, as the Big Ten poaches more and more teams, the contract will get larger and larger. And basically, there's a certain number. So the contract is not with ESPN, which is what we're going to spend most of our time talking about. It's with Fox, CBS, and NBC. So intriguing. Play the intriguing music. Fox is going to get the noon slot for the national game. CBS is going to get the 3:30 slot, and NBC is going to get the night game. So that's a lot of money, and I want to put this in perspective. I had a memory of something, and fortunately I was able to find it. So if you're watching the video, here I am. I'm holding up a Hokie Huddler, and the headline says, CB Yes. And it's from February 25th, 1994, so almost 30 years ago. And the reason the Hokie Huddler was excited, Chris Colston wrote this article, is that the Big East Football Conference, which was formed in 1990, started round-robin play in 1993, and in February 1994, they signed a contract with CBS. Now, this was an 8-team football conference, half as many as the Big Ten. Big Ten's up to 16 now. And it was a 5-year deal for a total of $72 million. 72 divided by 5
That's a huge deal.
is $15.4 million a year.
That's just to 8 schools. That's before
8
that's
schools.
before dividing it between 8 schools.
Right. So it's the entire conference was getting a little over $14 million a year, and the Big Ten is about to get $1 billion a year.
Yeah.
That's what has happened in the last 30 years. Now, the other nugget I'll throw in there is, I didn't have time to find this, but what was interesting is right about that same time frame, CBS signed a contract with the SEC, which was for like $16 or $17 million. It was almost the same as the Big East Football Conference back then. So really interesting stuff. I just thought you would find that nugget interesting. We get asked a lot. I went on the message board today and I said, we're going on the podcast, give me some questions. 3 of the questions, and this was probably 2 hours ago, 3 of the questions were, what can the ACC do to close the gap?
To generate more revenue.
Chris, I'm going to tee you up, and I want you to tell ACC fans it's over.
Well, the only thing they could do is create a time machine, go back to 1953,
And then
and
join
choose
the
the choose the type of teams instead of bringing in your Wake Forests and your teams like that and Dukes into the ACC and making a basketball conference back then. Bring in big state schools. That's the only thing they could do. There's not enough people. There's not enough fans in the ACC. It's not like the Big Ten has all these big state schools with, like, some of those schools, like 50,000 people go to them.
Yeah.
Their alumni, alumni is just huge. I mean, they beat the ACC and everybody else, quite frankly, by numbers.
Yeah.
There's not enough football fans in the ACC, not even at Virginia Tech. Like, the only game Virginia Tech's selling out this year is West Virginia, and I'm guessing West Virginia fans help with that.
Yeah.
So we can't even sell out a 66,000 seat stadium when in a year where, you've got Miami and West Virginia at home and Virginia at home, right? And we've only sold out one of those games. So there's just not enough interest by fans in ACC football. Florida State, look at their stadium these days. Nobody goes.
A lot of empty seats.
Well, yeah, so it's just that you don't have the numbers in the ACC to compete with that. Like, and even if they did come out with some genius way, all right, so the Big Ten is ahead of the ACC by $65 million per school. About that. So even if the ACC
per year,
even if they came up with something brilliant and the ACC started making $20 million more per school in television revenue, they're still $45 million behind.
I know.
It's over.
It's over, folks. That ship is sailing.
Well, and so when you build a conference, and I don't want to say mostly basketball schools, but they're smaller private institutions where over half of the ACC, Boston College is a Jesuit a small Jesuit university. Wake Forest is a private institution. Pitt is sort of a private institution. Duke is a private school.
Georgia Tech kind of seems like it.
Even
sometimes.
Virginia Tech and Virginia, which are state schools, they're not as big as some of the Big Ten.
Virginia's what, like 16,000 people?
Yeah, and
17,000.
And so Miami's a private school. Syracuse is a private school. I mean, when half of your league membership is private institutions that don't care that much about football, like no wonder for the ACC is a basketball conference. That's because Duke and North Carolina, that's all they've been able to care about so much because they don't have enough people to care about football. Yeah. And then you look at the Big Ten where, like, it's just state school after state school after state school. I mean, the private institutions are what? Northwestern, and there's maybe a couple others. But when you've got a school like Nebraska, Ohio State, Iowa, like
well, the number one largest living alumni base in the country, I believe, is Penn State. It's something like 650,000 people.
Yeah, Penn State, Illinois. I mean, the list just Michigan. The list goes on and on and on. And
so Penn State's what, 650 is what you said?
I think so. Yeah.
And Tech's like what, 250 or 300?
Getting close to 300 last I heard. It's odd when you search living alumni. It's actually a hard figure to find. It's not.
So Penn State has twice as many living alumni as Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech's one of the biggest schools in the ACC.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. So that means they've got like, who knows, like how many, how far are they ahead of Duke and Wake Forest and Georgia Tech and Virginia and smaller schools like that? Yeah. So you don't have the numbers to compete with the Big Ten.
And there's just not enough interest. I mean, like when you look, the reason.
Well, if you look at the ratings.
Yeah, I was going to say the reason why the SEC and the Big Ten have these ginormous media deals is because they're the ones who play the best football.
Yeah.
I mean, you put a Wisconsin game on, and they're doing their thing, and then you flip the channel over to the Florida State Wake Forest game. And Wake Forest is down in Tallahassee drilling a program that used to be great, and there's 35,000 people there watching.
It's a bad look.
It's not intriguing.
Yeah. So if you go back to that 1990s Big East contract, the Big East at the time, they had some dogs. I mean, Temple and Rutgers were dogs. And Tech was an unknown quantity at that point in time. But, Miami was in full throat. If I remember correctly, West Virginia had played for the national championship.
West Virginia had, I think it was every 4 years, every 5 years.
Every 5 years.
I think 1988 they won unbeaten. 1993 they won it unbeaten.
And I think they played Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl that year. And I think that was Lou Holtz's last.
That 1993 West Virginia team that went unbeaten, Tech lost to by 1 point. 14-13.
Yes, because
in Morgantown.
Yep.
Did somebody miss an extra point or something?
No, it was a long field goal that Ryan Williams, I think was his name, missed.
Well, Tech's kicker back then had half a foot, so we have to forgive him for missing a long field goal.
So I asked Jeff Holland one time. I remember this. I think it was the day I met Jeff. I met him at the bar at Champs in 1996 or so, and I said, "So you got West Virginia on the ropes in Morgantown, and you're losing by 1 point, and Ryan Williams lines up for the game-winning field goal, and he misses it. Do you guys do you put your arms around his shoulder, say, that's okay, you'll get the next one? And Jeff was like, we wanted to kill him." So let's get back on track here. So we talked about the money more than I wanted to because, it is what it is. So what does this, with ESPN getting cut out of, and ABC, getting cut out of the Big Ten stuff starting in a year to 2 years. What does this mean for the ACC in terms of, it's not going to mean more money. It's not going to mean more money.
Because the ACC is tied into that fabulous deal.
And I see people arguing on our message boards, oh, well, now it's in the ESPN's best interest to keep the ACC happy. And I'm
now they've got us locked up long term. They're not just going to give the ACC more money because they're nice.
To negotiate with the Pac-12 and the Big 12, which is probably the Pac-10 and the Big 10.
Yeah,
I mean,
but I want to talk about time slots. Do you think this will lead to more ACC games and better time slots?
It could. Depends on what they do with the Big 12, how hard they go after them are they going to get them to sign a new deal and But like, there's not that many intriguing teams left in the Big 12 either, is there?
I don't think so.
No.
Oklahoma State, if you consider
Oklahoma
them.
State, TCU.
Cincinnati's going into the Big 12.
That's
Yeah,
true.
I mean, there. I think it'll all depend on how the Big 12 and the Pac-12, because both of those conferences starting in like 2024, I think their deals wane off, and that's why, Texas, Oklahoma, USC, UCLA are able to leave, right?
Right.
How those two conferences negotiate with ESPN, because they need television revenue, is going to be interesting. But I do think it'll essentially become a, and of course the SEC is going to be only ESPN at some point in the next couple of years. It's going to go from CBS and
That's
ESPN
right.
to only ESPN.
Yeah.
But I think the ACC is the one thing at this moment in time that ESPN has right now and is going to have, and that's not going to change. So I think the answer to your question is maybe, probably. It all depends on the status of ACC football and how much it, the trajectory. Can Brent Pry and Virginia Tech be good again? Can Mario Cristobal get Miami good again?
Yeah.
Can Florida State be good again? If the ACC starts playing decent football, they'll get decent television slots.
Yeah,
that's right. You have to
right.
root for the teams you hate to be good. That's the way it works.
That's
in
the way it
conferences.
works. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we need some of those schools that we don't like to be good. That's just the way it is. I will say that I think the group, the entity that has the best deal on all of this is NBC, because they get to keep showing Notre Dame in the afternoon, and then they got a Big Ten game at night. So they might have Notre Dame.
Well, they're showing some stuff on Peacock too.
Yeah, right.
I think it's interesting that the Big Ten had the gonads to turn their back on ESPN.
Well, from what I read, it was ESPN. They basically said, this is what you will be bidding for the slots. And ESPN already paid that amount for more stuff with the SEC. And they said, well, why would I pay the same amount for less?
ESPN walked away from the table. Yeah. So one of the things that gets said, back when in the last TV contract go around for the ACC was, particularly with the 5 games a year agreement with Notre Dame, why didn't the ACC go to NBC, go to Fox, go to CBS, and there's people out there that follow this stuff a lot closer than I do, and maybe there are good answers for that, but I just thought it was an opportunity missed.
It might have been.
But I think there was a fear. I think and I think it's great that the Big Ten has broken that mold, because I think there was a fear of, if you go away from ESPN, then you're going to get punished by not being talked about, any of that stuff.
You never know with those other networks. Like, I don't know much about television. None of us do.
Right.
Not nearly as much as the people who run it. So if the ACC had done that and gone to those other networks, would those networks been on board, or would they have said, you know what, I think in 5 or 6 years, we're going to be able to get the Big Ten? And we'd much rather have them than the ACC.
It's hard to say how stuff.
I don't know. I don't know how they think in terms of long-term views and
I
things
think
like that.
this is kind of, this is the first time in like 40 years that the Big Ten, like in 2020, whenever the deal's 2023, it'll be the first time in 40 years that the Big Ten hasn't played on ESPN.
Ultimately,
ESPN.
Yeah,
This is like the first
yeah.
time really in a long time ESPN has not had a stake in that, which is just surprising.
Yeah, it is. It'll be weird, but ultimately, those are the 2 biggest shows in town. The SEC and the Big Ten. That's just the way it is. And the ACC. Here's the thing: like, the ACC, in my opinion, is the 3rd best conference in terms of the marketability of the
some of the brands. And that sort of thing.
Exactly. So it's not like we're some scrub league. We're the 3rd best college football conference in the entire world, right? But it's so far behind the top 2 that it's just you might as well not even be competing with them.
Well, as a dad with 2 kids who ran cross country, I went to a lot of cross country races where there were 2 kids way out in front of everybody else.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean number 3 sucks. It just means those number 1 and 2 are
they're
really,
just
really
way
good.
better than everybody else. Yeah, absolutely, and that's kind of the way I see it with the ACC right now. And ultimately, when you've got two people that are so far ahead of everybody else, then they ultimately become a competing product against themselves.
Yeah.
And they can't be on the same network. It would have been like WCW and WWF both being on the same channel back during like the wrestling wars and things like that. You can't have that. They had to be on two separate networks.
And so the NBC people are saying things like, this is great. We get night games where we can promote the Notre Dame broadcast, and during the Notre Dame broadcast, we can promote our night games. So some of that becomes a little self-fulfilling, but it's good.
And it also kind of blocks Notre Dame from having night games, home night games. So there's a little bit of leverage there.
Yeah.
To say, look.
Well, I think just the way it shapes out, if somebody broke down what network is going to host the SEC championship or Big Ten championship game between now and over the next 7 years, NBC has one.
NBC gets one,
and then Fox and CBS split the other two.
Split the other six.
That you know what I mean. And just NBC gets one big giant thing, but NBC, I think they get 8 games a year on Peacock, 8 football games a year.
In addition to their linear broadcast, which I think is something like 15 to 19.
So just the way it's going to shape out. And again, the SEC right now is on CBS and ESPN. At some point, it'll be the Big Ten's on CBS and the SEC's only on ESPN. And there's going to be a flip-flop in a couple years, but it's kind of strange to think about.
I'm actually happy for the Big Ten because I've always preferred their product to the SEC. Like, I think the SEC fans are just crazy. like they had to stop.
That's a bad thing?
No. I mean, like, they literally kill each other. Like, they had to stop playing the Florida-Georgia game in Jacksonville because they would all go there and kill each other.
Somebody got killed.
There was one year at a Thanksgiving meeting, like, there's one family member who's like Auburn, one who's Alabama, and at Thanksgiving, like, somebody died. I'm serious.
I shouldn't laugh. I'm sorry.
You shouldn't, but no, I'm serious. Like, those people are crazy. And don't get me wrong. I love being passionate about college football, but I think they take it a little too extreme down there. Yeah. So, like, I've always viewed myself as more, I don't know, Big Ten-ish than I would say than SEC, but that's just me.
Yeah.
At any rate, the SEC through the years has gotten so much hype, even in years where they haven't been as good and they don't deserve the hype that they get. They still give it
again. It becomes self-fulfilling.
Exactly.
You rank all the teams high, and then they beat a highly ranked team.
Right.
And it just
so
builds on itself.
I'm glad to see another conference in the headlines.
What I might add is, I don't know. You asked the question: will the ACC get better time slots? I don't know about for football, but for other sports, maybe. If you think about basketball, and now I think it is important to note that who knows what's going to happen to the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Right. Because the Big Ten is, it's an ESPN property.
I expect it's just not going to exist anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be the ACC Big East.
They could do the home ACC games on ESPN, and then if you're on the road at a Big Ten team, all the Big Ten home games are on Fox or whatever. Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but I do think it's interesting that all of these Big Ten products are now going to be on either Fox, NBC, or CBS. They're no longer going to be on ESPN. So how many time slots during college basketball season? How many time slots does that open up? Right. I mean, quite a bit. And if you're, of course, Duke, North Carolina. A lot of the ACC is a good basketball conference. Those schools are already going to be playing on, you would assume, big time television networks, but that opens up more. So I do think it might open up some stuff for ACC in other areas.
It's going to be interesting to see how the ratings shake out once everything gets established. And the other thing that's interesting to me is, this is a conversation that's probably more relevant to years ago. Like, I used to watch college football live every night. I DVR it and watch it. We all used to watch Game Day, and I think viewership of those things has declined because I got tired of college football live being the Alabama show every day. So I'm like, why am I watching this?
Yeah.
But anyway, ESPN's going to be in this position where they will have to talk about the Big Ten teams,
another
even though they're
station's
not
product
on their network. And it's funny, I saw a tweet where somebody was like, they were mimicking maybe Kirk Herbstreit or somebody like that. And it was a quote that said, sure, Ohio State's 12-0, and they're really good, but let me tell you why 7-5 Ole Miss is going to go to the college football playoff. Yep.
Yeah.
Now, Chris Fowler spoke at the Richmond Hokie Club football kickoff thing many years ago. I don't remember what year it was, but it was right about the time that the SEC Network was launching. And
a little before that, because I interviewed him about it. Anyway,
I had the I think it had been announced, and I had the opportunity to be having drinks with Fowler, Jimmy Anderson, and his wife Pat. Jimmy is the one who put these things together, and me. So it was the four of us. And I've told you guys before, I don't remember exact details. I remember how I felt, and I remember I asked Fowler a question effectively. So now that you got the SEC Network, you're gonna have to be disciplined and not promote them over everybody else or something like that. Fans are going to be looking for bias now that you've got the financial backing behind the SEC Network. Mm-hmm. He got agitated.
Did he?
He did not appreciate that comment. And of course, since then, all they've done is talk about the SEC and put them in all the best time slots. Right. And yeah, I get that. So.
Yeah, I think who knows what happens to College Game Day now? Does College Game Day? Yeah, they would occasionally not go to. Yeah, they would.
Are they going to go to Ohio State, Michigan now?
Well, that's what I mean. They would go to Ohio State, Michigan, even though they're not broadcasting a game. But are they going to
somebody else's product when it comes down to it?
Yeah, I don't know, and that's not a thing that they're gonna do every single week now. If the Big Ten ends up becoming the best football, if 1 year the Big Ten is the best football product over the SEC, or is College Game Day? College Game Day can't go to the Big Ten game every single week. So how that changes and just the coverage of it's going to be interesting.
There's going to be two different College Game Days. Maybe Fox starts their own.
Well, they have their big noon kickoff thing,
right.
Which they go head to head to each other, but. I mean, and like you mentioned, so many people don't even watch that stuff anymore because you can get everything on your phone.
It's true. I watch it if I'm already tailgating and it's on the TV
and it's there.
I turn it on. But would you watch that or Premier League?
Premier League.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an actual sport.
No, that's
instead of people talking about sports.
Yeah.
All right, so let's throw it.
They've got that.
Which is how we get paid.
Well, yeah, they've got that competing with College Game Day too.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's. I'm going to throw it to the message board for a couple questions for you guys. I also missed a joke that I meant to make earlier because I didn't put it in my notes. When I read all those quotes about Brad Glenn and how much he loves him some Grant Wells, I meant to say, you guys make fun of me for having a man crush on Bryce Duke, and that's a huge man crush that Brad Glenn's got on Grant Wells.
No doubt.
So sorry for the misplaced joke. B. Brenzel 10. What makes this season a successful one, aside from wins under the new staff? What are you going to be looking for?
Bowl game.
I say player development.
Well, they said aside from wins. Yeah,
don't be pansies. Don't get run over.
Yeah. Look more like a traditional Virginia Tech football product, I would say.
I think if you can see positive change in the culture. And you asked about Mark Packer. Did you remember the quotes Eddie Royal gave me from that?
I do not remember that. What did he say?
Essentially, Eddie Royal, and I'm paraphrasing. If you want to go get the exact quote, it is on Tech Sideline. But Eddie Royal essentially said along the lines of the alumni reach from Brent Pry and his new staff, it's a complete 180. And it's what we needed. And he could not be doing anything better in that area. And that it doesn't matter if you played for a year, if you played for 4 years, if you were a walk-on, if you were a 4-year starter, that he wants you back in Blacksburg.
Yeah, I go to the gym with a couple of former Tech players, and they've both gotten the emails from whatever lady in the athletic department's handling all that, saying, look, everybody's welcome to come to a practice. Just let us know a day in advance so we know you're coming. That's what they emailed to all the former players and things like that. So, yes, it's been quite good.
So that's a pretty good memory, David. I
told one of them to go to the scrimmage this Saturday and let me know what happens. so we'll see if he does.
Royal called Pry's alumni outreach, quote, a complete 180. He's done a great job of that. There's nothing more he could do in that field. It doesn't matter if you're a 4-year starter or you didn't start at all. He wants you to come back and welcomes you with open arms.
I paraphrase that pretty well.
So pretty good memory, yes. Yeah, it's one of those deals where, they're not asking us, do you want to see Tech average 350 yards a game on offense and give up only 300 on defense? It's not stuff like that. It's just, what does it look like when I'm watching it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you will know if the alumni feel positive about coming back, if they feel like they have a connection again, that is good. And if you can see player development and just the culture, that is good. I mean, wins and losses, again, one guy gets injured and your whole season could be over. So wins and losses can be changed in the snap of the fingers, but showing progress in player development, culture areas, I think that would make it a successful season.
And if you make progress in player development, it'll lead to wins.
Yes.
So that's what we're looking for.
You would think.
All right. RJH for VT says, what position group / players on offense are you most confident in performing?
It's like quarterback and tight end.
Yep.
It doesn't mean I'm not confident in the other positions or any of the other positions. I think there's strengths and weaknesses there at each spot. But I would say I feel the best about quarterback and tight end.
I'm confident about Connor Blumrick as an athlete.
No quite. Yeah, right. That's right. You see, I was throwing him in there with tight ends just because everybody's going to do it.
Yeah, tight ends, I mean, you've got Blumrick, Drake Julius, and Nick Gallo. 3 veterans in that room.
Some good young talent.
Brent Pry said if there's 3 better freshmen tight end in the country, then he wants to see them. So Tech has 3 freshmen. I think it's the best tight end recruiting class in Virginia Tech history. Dallin Wright, Harrison St. Germain, Benji Gosnell.
Well done.
I think one of them will probably play, but you could get away with redshirting them all if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
So
which I love.
Some of the back channel stuff that we are getting is that Joe Rudolph is really doing a great job building culture on the offensive line, and again, that's back channel stuff. So they're just so thin. I'm not sure how things are going to go for them if players get dinged up.
Particularly thin at tackle. Like Janzi Clements, you're not allowed to get hurt.
Yeah, Xavier Chaplin.
He's massive, but he's a true freshman.
He's true freshman. Yeah, 6'4", 266. Is he 6'6"?
6'6", 338. He's actually dropped about 30 pounds, I believe, since he was.
Yeah,
but he's massive.
Chris knows the number.
He makes Janzi look a little bit small, which is hard to do.
But he's a true freshman, and he's Tech's backup left tackle right now. Right. He's very talented, and he's been
Christian Darrisaw started as a true freshman at left tackle, but he had a year at Fork Union in between, and he was good as a true freshman. He wasn't dominant. Yeah. So you can't expect a true freshman right out of high school to just come in and play at a Christian Darrisaw level if he had to jump in there.
To my point, there's just not much depth at all across the board. And I mean, that is something Brent Pry addressed at Media Day last week. He said that along with linebacker, along with defensive back, there are plenty of, positions where Virginia Tech has, and I've said this all along, I think Virginia Tech is pretty good across the board starting wise, but there's a big drop off.
I think so. I do think they lack depth at most spots. I feel good about the backup quarterback. I feel good about a large number of tight ends. I actually feel a little bit better about wide receiver right now than I did in the beginning of spring because I do think I've seen player development there. So I feel better about some guys like Christian Moss. But the offensive line is kind of scary. I wish they had one more true offensive tackle who was like a redshirt sophomore or something like that. Doesn't have to be like an upperclassman with a ton of experience, but just somebody who's been in the program. I'd feel so much better if they had a guy like that. And they looked in the transfer portal to find another offensive tackle, but that's the thing. Like, there's not that many good offensive tackles to begin with anyway. Like a lot of teams out there, like one of their offensive tackles isn't really like a true tackle anyway, and that's kind of the case with Tech this year. There's just not that many guys who are 6'5" or taller who can move their feet well enough to be an offensive tackle. So and I don't think linemen have a tendency to hit the portal as much as your other positions. So I think I just think the chances to find a good one in the portal are going to be small. And if you do, then every school in the country is going to be after him. Like Tech found
You remember
one.
Virginia when the coaching changed? Virginia had like 3 or 4 starting offensive linemen,
including their left tackle / wide receiver that they use on the goal line. What was his name?
Not going to score a touchdown.
I don't care enough to know.
Yeah. Bobby.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is his first name or his last name?
That's a good question.
Bobby Haskins. That's who it was. Yeah.
But
but to my point, Virginia had like 4 or 5 offensive linemen leave because of the coaching change, and they got snapped up like that
by USC. I think he ended up at USC. There was a guy from a Ivy League school that Virginia Tech went after.
The Harvard guy.
Yeah, went to Harvard now, and I was going like Ohio State or Penn State or something like that. Like I'm saying, like there's just not that many good offensive linemen available. So when one is available in the portal, everybody's going to be going after him. So that's important. So that means it's important to develop your own offensive lineman. You can't just go out there and grab a guy on the portal like you can a running back or a wide receiver or even a quarterback these days.
Well, that's why Joe Rudolph makes big bucks.
That's right.
So here's a brief one I will take. When does the Nike contract expire, and what can VT expect in a new one? I don't know the second part. The Nike contract. So if you've never seen this, I wrote an article about Tech's Nike contract about 6 years ago. So just Google Virginia Tech's Nike contract, Tech sideline. And it talks about how the Nike contract at that point in time was the 5th worst in the country. And the other 4 have since been renewed, and Tech's now got the worst Nike contract in the country. It runs through June of 2023.
So next year.
And I wrote that article 6 years ago, and it was like a 2-year-old contract at that point in time. What can Tech expect in a new one? I don't know. There was a time period. What got me to write that article 6 years ago was Under Armour signed UCLA for $17 million a year cash, which was ridiculous. It's like right before the housing market crashes, you hear about all these insane prices. And that's just not the landscape right now. Under Armour is actually trying to get out of that contract and other contracts. So
there's not as big of a competition between the two now. So that's probably not driving up the prices. And then number 2, like the increase in television contracts since then, even for the ACC, has kind of made these Nike contracts and Under Armour contracts kind of like, it doesn't matter nearly as much.
Yeah, like if you make an extra $500,000 to $1 million a year off $125 million athletic department, how big of a difference does that
it used to make a big deal, and now I don't think it's going to make it's not going to move the needle very much, I don't think.
All righty, one more question, then we'll call it a day. Go Hokies, go. It's kind of a long question. I expect the overall play to be better this year due to the upgrade in position coaches and support staff. Does your crew think the approach will be very, very conservative on offense and aggressive on defense? I don't mean no razzle-dazzle or shots on offense, but a lot more running and short passing to stay on the right side of the chains and a more attacking style and personnel groupings on defense.
I think they'll try to be balanced on offense, but, I mean, I wouldn't say they're going to be conservative. I mean, you go back to these quotes about Glenn when he says, you like to take 2 or 3 deep shots a quarter, but with Grant Wells, it might be even more. So that doesn't sound like conservative game plan to me. Yeah, so no, I don't think it's going to be conservative. Here's what I've learned over multiple decades of being a college football fan. Almost everybody thinks their coach, their play callers, and their head coach is conservative. I remember when I was like 12, and my Sunday school teacher at church used to just complain about George Welsh. Oh, he was so conservative. And then we had a UNC fan talking about whoever their coach was at the time. Oh, too conservative. And Tech fans always thought Beamer was too conservative. And they thought Justin Fuente and Cornelson were too conservative. College football fans think 2 things. They don't think their coach throws at the tight end enough, and they always think that their coach is too conservative.
I think the only coach that people might not think is conservative might be Mike Leach.
That's fair.
Because he's a very non-conservative guy.
But no, I mean, in all seriousness, I think Tech will try to be balanced. I do think they'll take more shots down the field than you're used to, because I think that's Grant Wells' strength, is his deep ball accuracy and his arm strength and everything like that. I agree with Glenn that Wells is very good at that, and I don't see the sense of going to battle without using all your weapons. Especially your best weapon.
Yeah. As far as defense, I would expect him to be very aggressive. I mean, you got to remember who's going to be calling the plays. It's going to be Brent Pry himself.
That's true.
Year one. So I would expect, I can't say how aggressive, but you got to think of Brent Pry is going to want to blitz. He's going to want to be aggressive.
All right. Appreciate it, fellas. That wraps up episode 248 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. I believe we'll finally have the whole crew back next week so I can get out of the hosting gig, and much appreciated there. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, and we'll see you next time on the Tech Sideline podcast.